Welcome to the Wellness in a Chaotic World podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl Davis. Before we dive in, I wanted to note that as a health and wellness coach, I can support you in making sustainable lifestyle changes, tuning into your own wisdom, and building habits that align with your values and vision for your well being. I don't prescribe or treat health conditions, as I'm not a doctor or a mental health professional. Instead, I can walk alongside you as you create a healthier life on your terms. From time to time, I share conversations with guests. The views and opinions expressed by those guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect my views or those of anyone associated with wellness in a chaotic world. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always talk to your doctor or qualified mental health provider about any physical or mental health concerns. This is the Wellness in a Chaotic World podcast, a place where we're having conversations about what it really takes to live well in our unhealthy, chaotic world. I'm your host, Cheryl Davis. If you're beating yourself up over a bag of chips you ate in a stressed out frenzy, or you can't figure out how anyone manages to find the time to even think about wellness, you're in the right place. We talk about all of these things and more because, frankly, we don't talk to each other enough about what we're really up against every day. Let's change that right now. Hey everyone, it's Cheryl. I wanted to start this podcast with a short episode to let you know why I started the podcast and also to give you a sense of what you can expect to hear each week. So I thought I would start with a little bit about my own story and how I got here. About 2 years ago, I was struggling with some extra weight, and it was making it very hard for me to keep up with my very active little one. And around the same time, I started having painful digestive issues. So I would go to bed at night and I would start to have acid reflux. And then I would start to have gas and burping. And it was so painful that I couldn't sleep. On the nights that I could sleep, I would wake up with horrible joint pain. Because this was all happening during COVID, the first thing that I did was visit a doctor via telehealth. Since we were kind of limited in the testing that we could do at that time, he told me to start with the simplest explanation, and he put me on omeprazole. I tried that for a few days, but it really didn't seem to do much. And I had some concerns about it because I've read that omeprazole can cause more issues with your digestion. Once I was able to see my regular doctor, I went to her and we discussed all of my symptoms and, did the lab work. But she really didn't have many answers for me. It was kind of a mystery for her, too. So she sent me to a gastroenterologist, which makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, he dismissed me. At least that's the story I told myself at the time. There was about 6 months between getting my referral to see him and having the appointment. In the interim, I had lost a little bit of the weight and I wasn't having the gastro symptoms as often as I had been. The inflammation was still there and the joint pain was still raging, but the stomach related issues weren't bothering me as much. While waiting in the exam room, I could see and hear the doctor in his office because the nurse had left the door open. I saw him sit down, open my file, and then heavily sigh. As someone who is driven to keep peace and harmony in all of my interactions, I did not advocate for myself well that day. Because I downplayed the severity of my symptoms, said they weren't bad all the time, and only briefly mentioned the joint pain, he focused on the acid reflux. He asked me if I was taking my omeprazole correctly. And he said, most people don't do it correctly, and he told me to go back and do it again. Well, obviously, I knew in my heart that the acid reflux was not my main issue. That might have been a symptom, but there was a lot more going on with me. My body was inflamed. I was having a lot of joint pain. I felt like crap and my body was super pissed off. Plus, I really didn't want to take the omeprazole. It just felt like I was covering up what was really wrong. So at that point, because I was convinced that traditional doctors were not going to be able to help me, I decided I was going to have to do some investigation on my own. I had already been seeing a lot of stuff online, things from Dr. Mark Hyman, for example, about how food is not really what it should be these days, that the standard American diet is just not good for us. It may be something that we see as normal, but it's not. healthy. I also started asking myself questions like, what does it really take to be healthy in this crazy mixed up world? So I actually Googled that very question and I stumbled upon the work of Pilar Gerasimo. She's the author of The Healthy Deviant. And that book really changed my mind about a lot of things. Her point was that what passes for normal these days is not really healthy, and that we really have to do something different. We have to be rebels in order to take care of ourselves. As I continued looking into healthier foods and healthier lifestyle, I came across the work of Dr. William Lee. In his book, Eat to Beat Disease, he talks about the different systems of the body that are actually meant to heal us and protect us from environmental threats. He talks a lot about the recent research into specific foods and how they affect those systems. Around the same time that I was reading all of these books, I was also experimenting with intermittent fasting, which, to be honest, was very helpful for getting rid of that extra weight. And while it's not something that I would necessarily do as a regular practice, it was very helpful in getting me over that hump. I went from 247 pounds down to 227 pounds, and that was amazing. But, it didn't really necessarily fix the problems I was having with my digestive system. I mean, I felt a lot better, but I was still having those painful nights where I couldn't sleep. So I know that my digestive system is a little bit more sensitive than some people's. I already eat a gluten-free diet because about 15 years ago, I went to a doctor having some milder symptoms, but similar. Uh, and he said, "Why don't you try a gluten-free diet?" He tested me for celiac disease and it wasn't, that test didn't come up with anything. But he told me to try the diet anyway, and it did alleviate those symptoms at the time. So for these new symptoms, I thought, okay, maybe there's something else that's triggering the problems. So what I did was an elimination diet for 30 days with the blessing of my regular doctor. I did the Whole 30 program. The Whole 30 program showed me that I was actually reacting and becoming inflamed because of dairy. So by eliminating the dairy, those horrible digestive issues and my joint pain resolved. And I even went on to lose more weight. Of course, I can't sit here and tell everyone to get off dairy to solve all of their problems. That's obviously not how it works. You know, not everyone has problems digesting dairy. We're all individuals with a wide range of health and wellness concerns. There's a concept called bioindividuality that, if you stick with me for this podcast, you are likely to hear more about. But on some level, because we are all individuals, we really have to be our own advocates if we want to live vibrant, healthy lives, no matter what age we get to. So, as I was going through these health issues, I was learning a lot about functional medicine and how it attempts to figure out the root causes of a person's health problem instead of covering up the symptoms with pharmaceuticals. And this made a lot of sense to me, given my own experience going to the doctor for help. And everyone I talked to about it seemed to have a similar story, or the general consensus seemed to be that our healthcare system and our food system are a complete mess. But those issues seem so large and so unfixable by the individual person. Even though I know there are really well-intentioned people out there trying to solve the problems with healthcare and insurance. But to me, I wanted to take on um, the issues of the individual. I wanted to get to the heart of what we can each do in the environment that we find ourselves in today. That seemed like a manageable piece of the larger puzzle. So that's why for this podcast, I'll be interviewing people about their journeys toward better health and wellness. Through their stories, you may learn about concepts or ideas that you've never heard of, like autophagy or integrative nutrition. But I also hope that you'll hear the practical advice about things like making mindset shifts or coping with anxiety. So, thank you for listening to the short version of my journey to better health and wellness. I hope you enjoy the upcoming episodes. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review of the podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me or DM me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and that information will be in the show notes. You can also find me online at wellnessinachaoticworld.com. Until next time, have a happy, healthy week. If today's episode resonated with you, our private Facebook group is a great place to dive deeper, ask questions, and share wins with people who understand. It's free, it's private, and you can join by clicking the link in the episode description. I hope to see you there.